Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Lani Habrock here, your Government Affairs Director for CAIR Oklahoma. Welcome to another episode of Coffee with the Candidates. Today, we are excited to have someone running for Senate. We have candidate Rick Dunham here. I'll just do a quick introduction for Rick. He actually has a long history of serving in our armed forces. His father and his grandfather were fighter pilots from the Gulf and Vietnam War eras. Rick Dunham wanted to serve in a different fashion, and he chose to join the United States Army as a tank commander and as a scout platoon leader. Rick received his undergrad degree from Oklahoma State University on an Army ROTC scholarship, where he was on the OSU rugby team and led the Army ROTC push-up board and t-shirt cannon teams during the OSU football and basketball games. He graduated in 2008 and commissioned as an active duty armor officer. He left active duty in 2015 and returned to Stillwater, Oklahoma. Immediately, he got active in his community. While back home, he continued his military service as an Army reservist, receiving an early promotion to the rank of major in 2018. It was that same year that he decided to further his education and pursued his master's degree in international relations, with an emphasis on national security. Mm-hmm. So whether he's volunteering with local charity organizations, mentoring college students on planning and leadership, or working with government officials on veteran-related healthcare issues, Rick Dunham's dedication to serving his community and country is unmatched. Rick lives in Stillwater, Oklahoma with his wife of 6 years, Michelle, who works in physical therapy. It says they enjoy spending their time together by working out, eating at new restaurants in town, and supporting OSU. So everyone, would like to welcome candidate Dunham. So excited to have him on our show today.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. I want to make sure, so I know it's coffee with the candidates. I'm an energy drink kind of guy, so that's what I brought here today, and I want to make sure that's all right with everyone.
That's acceptable. Did you know the Muslims invented coffee?
I did know that.
Yes. Awesome. Yeah, so let's just jump right into our interview. Candidate Dunham, so I know that a lot of people love that you have served in the military. I come from a huge background of Air Force people, and then my brother is in the U.S. Army as well. And so I'm just curious, how did your experiences as a veteran both motivate you to run, and also how did it inform your policy priorities?
Yeah, so one of the things that military service kind of instills into you, just as a part of, like, it just becomes second nature, is a sense of stepping up to the plate when you're needed, right? So, you know, as a military officer, one of the things that was so common is, yeah, I would have my assigned job, but you would be at a unit where things still needed to be done. You'd have a manpower shortage, and someone would need to step up to the plate and fulfill that job in addition to whatever it is that you were normally assigned to do. And so it's that kind of mindset where always being willing to put yourself forward, to step out in front, take charge of a situation, take ownership of a situation, is something that is kind of instilled into me, and something that does kind of inform not only the policies that I would like to kind of get after, but kind of led me to run to begin with. The second piece to that, how my military service kind of informed or inspired my decision to run, was just a sense of being observant. There was the reason I decided to run, and this was kind of the rabbit hole that I started in that eventually led to me deciding to run for office, was a drive on Perkins Road here in Stillwater, if you're familiar with Stillwater at all, and noticing how many payday loan businesses were up here in Stillwater, which was something that I kind of associated with a high poverty rate. Further research on that indicated that our county had about a third of our residents living below the poverty line. That was kind of the start, the little like drop in the bucket, if you will, that then eventually led to me deciding to run for office.
Yeah, so I actually wanted to ask you specifically about payday lending. What about them have you seen is so harmful to communities? What is it about payday lending specifically that you feel hurts communities?
Sure. So payday loan businesses are really interesting. So I think it's important to note, as someone that's running as a Democrat and is more sympathetic to progressive ideas, the idea of payday loan businesses was originally a progressive brainchild. What it was it was a way for lower and lower middle class families to build and establish a line of credit. Right, that was the original intent. Kind of back in the, I believe it was in the Depression era was when that kind of started. Where things kind of started to fall apart, however, was when it came to deregulation of payday loan businesses. And now you find that they're charging just exorbitant annual percentage rates when it comes to the loans that they divvy out. And it ends up catching people in this cycle of poverty. We would see it outside of military posts all the time. You can't afford milk for your kids. So you have to go and get a payday loan to go buy some milk, and now you are paying, instead of however you say it's like $4 for a jug of milk, you're now paying $10 next month once your payday comes in, and now you're just caught in this continuous cycle of debt that you can't work your way out of.
Yeah, absolutely. We've worked. At CAIR Oklahoma, we've worked with a few different organizations that have tried to tackle that issue. It really is a problem in Oklahoma, just in general. I live near 23rd Street, and I mean, there's a part of it that's like really nice, but you go down a little further east, and I mean, all of a sudden you've got like 4 payday loan places just like right next door to each other. And so I agree with you. I think personally that it's an indicator of people getting taken advantage of.
Yeah, and that's one of the most, that's so interesting that you bring that up. That's you tend to see payday loan businesses tend to cluster together, right? And you could almost take a map of like where marginalized communities live within a city, right? If you were to do like a heat map of that, and you would find payday loans located in those exact same spots. It's just when we talk about the issues that are kind of hot button topics right now with systemic racism, people getting caught in a cycle of debt is absolutely a part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll change subjects here in a minute, but I do want to say, something that I've heard said that just rings so true is that you have to pay more to be poor. You have to pay more for any loan that you get. You have to pay, more for your mortgage rate, your car loan rate. I mean, you have to pay more for your medical.
The way I heard that quote was, being poor is expensive, or something to that effect.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and that gets us into our next topic. Another one of your policy priorities is healthcare.
Yeah.
So I know that when you started your campaign, that was before State Question 802 passed.
Yes.
And so my question for you is, well, first, if you want to tell everybody what State Question 802 did, and then if you want to tell us what you see as the next step.
Sure. So for anyone who may be watching the show and is unaware of what State Question 802 was, it was the Medicaid Expansion ballot initiative that was passed in this recent election back on June 30th. Essentially, what that meant was, so we passed the Affordable Care Act back in 2009, I believe, and a part of the Affordable Care Act was a funding provided to states to expand their Medicaid programs. Oklahoma was one of the states that refused to accept that expansion. So, fast forward 10 years, nothing has happened. This money is literally just sitting in a pot waiting for us to say, yes, we will take this money. We've been paying into it for, the entirety of that decade. And meanwhile, people are dying, preventable deaths, because they don't have the necessary health care to take care of themselves. So the people took it upon themselves to try to force Medicaid expansion through a ballot initiative, and the people spoke and passed the initiative. And so now Medicaid expansion is a part of not only our law, but a part of the state constitution here in Oklahoma. Now, what that means and what the next step is, well, one, and I believe Cindy Munson talked about this last week, is that One of the major issues was, and it may have been Marilyn Bell on a different Zoom call. At this point, they're all starting to run together, and I'm kind of forgetting who said what. But one of the issues that the state is going to be dealing with is figuring out how to balance our state's budget with this now new requirement that's going to be coming in. So there is the argument, and it is true, that it is going to help the state's economy to a certain degree in terms of bringing in medical-related jobs. But that kind of thing takes a little bit of time to take effect. So the state does have some upfront costs in terms of how we budget our money. And that is going to be an extremely difficult thing to do given the state of our state's economy right now. Not only are we dealing with having just an intrinsically weak economy because we're one-dimensional that focuses on a commodity that's going to go up and down, but then the pandemic on top of all of that has caused a severe budget shortage, not only from this last year, but we don't know what's going to be happening in the future years. So think about all the things that are on our plate right now. Number one, we spent some rainy day funds, so we need to refill that. Number two is making sure that we can fully fund our education needs. And then number three is going to be our healthcare, and figuring out how to balance those three priorities in the coming years is, I think, probably going to be the number one job of all of our legislators coming up.
Yeah, well, and I expect this year, or 2021, to be a very tumultuous year at the legislature, just because we are going to have that budget shortfall, and because there are different priorities among different people. So it'll be interesting, to say the least, I think. So we've talked about healthcare and payday lending. Are there any other issues that you wish that voters knew more about?
Yeah, absolutely. One of our cornerstone issues, and I think this is really unique amongst Oklahoma candidates for office, is cybersecurity and addressing our state's cybersecurity concerns. Oklahomans have no idea how much of their data is online. They don't know how to protect themselves. They don't know how to protect each other, and that is something that I aim to fix. So I was listening to, there's a podcast that I listened to. It's called Intelligence Matters, by a guy that used to run the CIA for a couple of years. And he had someone that worked in the Obama administration. His name is Jay Johnson. I think he worked in Homeland Security. I cannot remember off the top of my head. But he shared this quote that cybersecurity, if you can try to imagine it, it's kind of like trying to stop rain from hitting the ground, right? You can't stop all the rain from hitting the ground. So what you have to do is you have to cover the most important pieces. And Oklahoma is doing that, right? When it comes to critical infrastructure and key resources, we're doing a pretty good job at protecting the most critical parts of our state on a government level. What's getting left out to dry, however, are individual people, right? So the real trick is to kind of go back to the analogy is, how do we make sure everybody has their own umbrella that they can protect themselves with? If you go to the Oklahoma Cyber Command website, and they do a great job, one of the critiques you will find is that they very rarely update their stuff, right? At least in terms of a public presence. And so how I specifically want to get after addressing some of the state's cybersecurity concerns is expanding the scope of Oklahoma Cyber Command's mission to include a permanent, sustained public relations campaign to make sure individual people know what the best cybersecurity practices are. And some of them are so basic, using good passwords, which people don't do all of the time, using things like two-factor authentication. Some of this stuff is really easy, but people just don't either, it doesn't become a habit, or they're unaware of it.
Yeah, well, and I mean, personally, I think we've all had at some point in our lives, like our credit card information stolen, or have had, somebody will spend $70 on gas in Idaho, and those are very frustrating. And it is nice that I appreciate that my bank has always said, okay, this is an unauthorized transaction, you're protected, they give the money back. But that person has gotten away with it, and they're going to keep doing it. And there's no mechanism to actually go after these people, and meanwhile I have to, cancel my bank account, get a new card, and it's just very frustrating. And I've seen that huge gap just in our justice system, that there's absolutely no branch to go after.
So enforcement is, I will tell you, when it comes to cyber crime and enforcing the law, when it comes to cyber crime, what you're going to find a lot is that is going to be outside the scope of what we're going to be doing here at the state level, right? This is a federally led effort. It's nothing for someone to live in California or Texas or Puerto Rico or India or China or Russia and work in a business that exists purely to scam people out of their money. How we enforce that is outside of something that I'm going to be able to control as a state senator. But what I can do is ensure that people have the tools to protect themselves if need be. Think of it, try to think of it as like a Second Amendment, but an online Second Amendment, and how people protect their own homes, if you will. So I'll tell you, our most vulnerable population when it comes to cyber crimes are our senior citizens. Something I see all the time is they'll have access to their data. A cyber criminal will have access to their data. They'll give them a call and they will pretend to be like one of their grandchildren that has been arrested and is trying to post bail. And so what they'll do is they'll say that they need to post bail with gift cards, and the grandparent, not knowing what to do, gives these gift cards to the criminal that is now currently acting as one of their grandchildren, and then they end up losing a lot of their money through that process.
There's so many scams out there. It's ridiculous. So I want to pivot a little bit to talk about this pandemic and how it has affected everybody's campaign who's running this year. What have you been doing to be able to connect with voters during this time?
So it's kind of, you're going to see a lot of themes here when it comes to this kind of question. A lot of the campaign, there's a formula to running a political campaign, right? And for a state senate race, it's making calls, knocking doors, right? That's basically what you do your entire time. The making calls part of it, still 100%, a part of what we're trying to do here. It does become a little bit more difficult because people are very conservative with their money right now, and understandably so. It's economic times right now are very tight, and so you have to put more effort in order to try to build a strong fundraising base. The second piece, the knocking doors piece. So it was kind of interesting because if you remember when everyone kind of knew the pandemic was coming for about 2 weeks or so, like late February, and I'll never forget it. It was the night of a Thunder game. The Thunder were getting ready to play the Jazz, and it all became real when Rudy Gobert, I think it was, tested positive for coronavirus, and they canceled the game. And it was just like that same night, like the United States just tried to shut down as best it can. Some people did anyway. But so for a while there, for a couple of weeks, everyone was just kind of staring at each other like, what do we do now? I'm referring to political candidates. No one really knew what to do. For us personally, we are back out on the doors again. Volunteers are doing lit drops, so they don't do like a door knock. They'll just drop some literature. I go out and I do knock doors, but our practice now is, so I'll knock on a door, I back up as far as I can get, right? So, we're talking well over 6 feet, probably closer to 10 to 12. And I have that conversation at that distance, and I wear a mask while I'm doing that. So, I do think that it's absolutely possible to get back out there and do the same things that you would do as a political candidate in a normal year, but you have to be mindful of the new practices that we have to incorporate.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we will close up this interview today, but I'm going to give you the last word. You said that you love to support Stillwater and your district businesses. What are some of the must-see, must-do, must-eat places in your district?
So something that I tell anybody that is ever considering opening a restaurant here in Stillwater is, if you don't have good cheese fries, you are not going to make it, right? And that is like Stillwater's staple. is cheese fries. A personal favorite of mine is Hideaway, right? And I know y'all in Oklahoma City have some fake versions of it, some knockoff Hideaways. Stillwater has the real one. And, it is a completely different experience. So next time you guys are up here, make sure to check it out.
Okay. Well, thank you, Candidate Rick Dunham, so much for being with us today. Everybody, you can, if you want to check out Rick's campaign, you can go to rick4ok.com, rick4ok. And I do have to say here that having someone on our show is not an endorsement, as in 501c3 nonprofit organization. We cannot endorse or oppose any candidates, but we are so pleased to have candidate Dunham on our show today. And like I said, if you want to learn more about his campaign, or if you live in Stillwater, especially in that area, check out rick4ok.com. Thanks for joining us.